What is going on, guys? This is Miasin. So today I wanted to go over the most played cards in Yu-Gi-Oh! And kind of ask ourselves a little question right here. So are these cards healthy for Yu-Gi-Oh! Or should we try to move forward without these cards in the future? So as you can see, we have a bunch of hand shops here because obviously they're super easy to play whatever deck you're playing. And there are a bunch of other kind of splashable cards that are also very generic. There's only like a few decks maybe that don't really want to play these cards. And then some other extra deck staples that, again, basically regardless of the kind of deck you're playing, you can always play at least one of them. So yeah, today I will try to go over all of these cards. But before we go any further, make sure you smash the like and subscribe button. It really motivates me a lot to keep making videos like these. And now let's get right into it. Alright, so I'm not really gonna shock you if I tell you that Ash is the most popular card in Yu-Gi-Oh! Right now. I mean, it negates just basically about everything. It negates any card or effect that can either search a card from the deck to the hand, or special summon a monster from the deck, or foolish a card from deck to grave. So the amount of ground you're covering is insane. Ghost Bell is very similar in the way it's worded to Ash, but it involves the graveyard instead of the deck. But basically everyone has to use the the deck, and some decks don't really have to use the graveyard that much. So that's the reason why Ghost Bell is a little more niche and Ash is just way more generic. And even though Ash is usually a little mediocre against some combo decks, sometimes it's actually extremely good against certain decks such as Branded Despia, because if you can stop their Branded Fusion, it's going to really put a dent in the kind of plays that they can do. So Ash is just so incredibly generic that there's almost no reason not to play Ash if you can play it. So again, it doesn't really shine in its power level, but rather in its applications. And in the OCG, it's completely different because they do have Max C, and because of that, Ash can negate Max C, which means that you basically have 3 extra copies of Call by the Grave just for Max C, which obviously is extremely convenient. So that's the reason why Ash is even more of a god card in the OCG than it is in the TCG. But even here, the card is still incredibly good, and which is the reason why it is the most at least not powerful, but played card in the game right now. And in second place, very close to it, is Infinite Impermanence, which is also an extremely extremely easy to play card. I mean, it's another hand shop just like Valor, but unlike Valor, this card is much safer to use because it doesn't turn on cards like Triple Tactic Talent or Thrust. It's obviously not a monster card. It can be drawn for turn and still have value. It can be used during any phase, whereas Valor is only on your opponent's main phase. So obviously Imperm just looks like a better version than Valor. The only real difference is that, I guess Valor, you always have it in your hand, you never have to set it, so Imperm can actually lose to like Duster or Lightning Storm if you have to set it when you go first. And Valor is a light spellcaster monster, which can matter if you're playing like Celine or any other thing that might be of relevance. And it is a level 1 tuner, which is also somewhat important depending on the deck that you're playing. But for the most part, these minor differences are irrelevant to the fact that Imperm is just much safer to use, much easier to just abuse, like because of the fact that, again, you can use it, you can draw it for turn, and it'll still be live, is the reason why Imperm is so good, on top of having the extra versatility of being able to negate spells and traps when you set it and flip it on the same column as your opponent's card. So Imperm is extremely good for a very good reason. And the card is still 3, and now what's per turn? Like, what? That makes no sense. Like, all these cards, nobody really ever asks, like, nobody really wonders, like, if these cards should stay the way they are, or, you know, is the problem something else? Because all these cards have been a 3 for literally the entire history of the game, but maybe we might have to change things up in the near future. Anyways, Drill and Logbird is also a very popular hand shot because the game has gone to the point where everyone can search a bunch of cards. I mean, if Ash is good, then it makes sense that Drool is good because everybody's also trying to interact with the deck. So it makes sense that Drool would be good against pretty much almost every combo deck out there. And also a bunch of mid-range decks, because I've made a video in the past saying that mid-range decks are kind of becoming closer and closer to combo decks. They can just do almost as much. They can turn like 2 cards into like 6 interruption, which is a little ridiculous. And obviously Drool sometimes can be good against that and sometimes not. For example, against Unchained, that's pretty mediocre. And against Fire King, sometimes it's just not enough because they can get their first search off of the island. And then after that, even if you draw them, it's not going to be doing enough because they can keep searching more on your standby phase. Yeah, sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. It's kind of like a hit or miss. If there is even more hit or miss than Drool, it would be Nibiru. The absolute worst feeling ever is drawing Nibiru against a trap deck, but to be fair, Droll and Logbird is pretty much the same. Obviously, the Nibiru would usually do nothing, or against players that are really competent to do know exactly what they do. Thing about Droll is that there is no specific timing for it. You just use it whenever your opponent searches. So you can be an idiot to resolve a Droll, and it kind of gets you there. And that's the reason why I think that cards like Droll and Logbird don't really deserve their place in the game. Ash, Imperm, and Nibiru are different stories because you actually have to understand how your opponent's deck works. There's actual interaction to a certain point, whereas Droll, you just throw it and you just hope that it does the job. And I'm not a really big fan of this card. I think it does limit card design. It also forces Konami to every now and then create like extremely powerful decks that just don't care about the card. Otherwise, it's going to be absolutely everywhere, and people will have no reason not to main deck 3 copies of the card, which is almost what we're seeing right now. The only reason why you wouldn't want to main deck Droll, it would be because of like Labyrinth and Unchained. But yeah, Nibiru is just the more reasonable, more fairer version of Droll, because unlike Droll that punishes you for just playing the game, Nibiru punishes you for overextending, not really playing around it correctly, so it's really not the same thing. And honestly, I don't feel like there's a single deck that truly loses to Nibiru. I only think that there are players that loses to Nibiru, and if anything, I believe that Nibiru is one of the healthiest staple in the entire game, and it should be maybe not the most played or the most popular, but the most respected, because the card is usually only good when nobody cares about it, and when people all play it, then the card becomes bad. It's like it's kind of like a paradox. It's good when it's bad, bad when it's good. Anyways, Valor is also in the top 10 most played cards in the entire game. By the way, if you're wondering what is my source for all of that, I can't say, but let's just say that you could also ask ChatGPT what are the most played cards in the format, and ChatGPT would answer you very accurately. So there we go. But yeah, Valor, like I said, worse version than Infinite Impermanence. If you see someone main decking 3 copies of Valor, it's because that person is also playing 3 copies of Imperm, and most likely 3 Ash. Usually, if there's Valor, like you're looking at 9 hatch-ups minimum. But yeah, I think Valor is like an okay-ish card. I mean, it has more flaws than Imperm, so it's fine if it exists. It's really not like this card that is a little too convenient, and also kind of directly power creeps affect Valor, to the point where I think this game would maybe be better off without Infinite Impermanence. There's also a very good rebuttal to that, and that rebuttal is the existence of Triple Tactic Talent. This card is very interesting because, just like Nibiru, it is also a hit or miss card, because obviously if your opponent didn't activate a monster effect on your main phase, it does nothing. But when you're going second, your opponent is always using monster effects, so this card will always be live going second, and being able to take control of a monster your opponent controls without targeting is, the majority of the time, you're gonna have to play into a board in order to use Triple Tactic Talents. That's the thing that I don't really like too much, but also being able to look at your opponent's hand is also very relevant. And against the Fire King deck, being able to rip the Kirin out of the hand can actually save you from a bunch of interruptions. Just that is relevant, even going second. And ironically, the funny thing about Triple Tactic Talents is that the draw 2 cards aspect of it is actually the worst. You only do that when you're completely screwed. So it's funny that Pot of Greed is not even that good. That doesn't justify Pot of Greed getting unbanned, by the way, for everyone trying to ask in the comment section. But yeah, after that, we've got Fenrir and Pot of Prosperity, which are also very popular staples. Yeah, these cards are just way too easy to play, basically, regardless of the deck that you're playing. Fenrir, there's really just no restriction. If you control no monster, you summon it from the hand. Inherent summon, not once per turn, and once per turn, you can search your deck for any Kishtir monster, including itself. And that is the real problem. That's the reason why people don't really like Fenrir too much. It's because it searches itself. Otherwise, it would have been completely fine. It would have been only really good in like Kashtira, or decks that are willing to play bricks, or just one Fenrir, but at this point you might as well play Pankratops. I believe that Fenrir should exist at the game if it is limited, but at 3 it doesn't really deserve to live, honestly. And Pot of Prosperity is very similar. Pot of Duality on crack, but you can still special summon. And that's the thing with Prosperity, it's way too generic, and it increases the consistency of your deck so much that it is really reminiscent when people had like a bunch of chicken games, upstart goblins, and there was no Droll running around. This card is way too good, especially when you can get like a floodgate, like an anti-spell or summon limit after you full combo at the very end. I do not believe that Prosperity should exist at 3. Just like Fenrir, I do believe that this card should just get limited. The funny thing is that none of these cards, in theory, are ban-worthy, like literally not a single one of them, but some of them, they're just a little awkward to limit. Like, for example, are we limiting Droll and Logbird? Doesn't really make any sense because you have to draw it in your opening hand. Infinite Impermanence is a little more logical to limit because at least you can still draw it at any point and it's still live. Ash, I mean, it's just gonna be a sacky one of. Same thing with all these hand traps. I mean, it really just doesn't make any sense. But the most reasonable cards to limit would definitely be Fenrir and Pot of Prosperity, just because of the fact that Fenrir can search Fenrir and Pot of Prosperity is just way too generic, and obviously helps decks way too much at just being able to dig into anything. Now, the two other most played cards in the extra deck would be SP Little Knight and Baron de Fleur. So obviously Baron is the very first level 10 synchro monster that can just negate anything, but the other effects are really good. So once per turn you can destroy any card on the field. It does target, but still, on any standby phase you can tag it out and then revive back a level 9 or lower monster from her grave. So obviously the only effect that's a little too good is the Omni Negate, and it does power creep a lot of other synchro monsters out there to the point where they become almost useless. It's way too good than every other option, but it's still not like that insane, because at the end of the day it's still a level 10 synchro monster, and it does what these high-level synchro monsters should be able to do. Alright, so next up is SP Little Knight, and I really disagree with the existence of this card because it power creeps just way too many cards, like Nightmare Phoenix, Cerberus, Unicorn. It has a better effect than Unicorn, and you don't even have to discard a card. I've expressed my frustration concerning this card way too often in the past, but I feel like I'm gonna have to do it again and again because it is too good, and I keep saying that it should get banned. Some people disagree, but when you look at the results, practically speaking, who is still playing Nightmare Monsters? Honestly, like, nobody. Unless you have to play like a Unicorn or a Phoenix, like for example in Salamangreat, you might still want to play a Phoenix because it is, you know, a fire monster, so you can still summon it even when you're restricted. Or Unicorn, it's still a Dark Fiend, so you can still summon it under some Unchained restrictions. Honestly, outside of that, these cards are kind of just useless, and they're objectively worse than SP Little Knight if you have the choice between summoning one or the other. The fact that SP Little Knight can banish any card on the field or in any graveyard, and also has a double Farfa-esque effect built into it, is just way too much, honestly. I think it is just a matter of time before this card gets banned. It's not like Baron de Fleur, for example, because this card does limit card design, and it is way too easy to summon, unlike Baron. I mean, it's still relatively easy to summon, but it's still a level 10 synchro monster, which is not the same because this card has like almost a comparable power level, and it's a Link 2. You just need any two monsters. You can kind of think of it of like as a generic contact fuse monster. It's a little cracked. I think SP is kind of ruining the game in a way just because it makes a lot of cards useless, but in another way I do think that SP is completely fine to a certain extent, because if you're going second, you do need all the power level in the world, and at least this card helps you crack boards. So that is the fine aspect about it, and that's the reason why I'm a little reluctant to being really adamant to banning the card. But yeah, I still think it's a little too good, just a little bit. And finally, we've got some more popular cards like Zeus as well as Typhon. Zeus, I mean, it's just only really there going second, so I think that's fine. And Typhon is the same. I think all of these cards are just really relatively okay. But my issue with Zeus is that it kind of power creeps like cards like Exeton Knight. There's kind of no reason to even use the effect when any Xyz monster out there can be like an Exeton. So that's what I kind of dislike about Zeus. It just renders a bunch of cards kind of just useless, honestly. The last time I saw Exeton Knight was in the Naturia Runic deck, because it doesn't really have a battle phase, so you can't really play Zeus. But apart from that, yeah, it's more acceptable than these cards that are good going first and, you know, second as well. But yeah, in conclusion, if I had to say like some of these cards are bad for the game or not, Ash is a card that maybe the game kind of just needs, even though I don't really like it because everybody will always play it. This game is probably better off without the card, but I can understand if people really want to keep it around. Infinite Impermanence, I'm not a big fan because we already have Veiler and we had it before, so this just feels like a much better version for no reason. But at least it punishes players for playing triple tactic talent and thrust. In a way, it inherently balances things out. Drool, I hate it because it allows bad players to do really well. You just drop this card whenever, and sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. Nibiru, I absolutely love it. I think this card should never get banned because this card basically punishes bad players and rewards good players. Effect Veiler, that's what Infinite Impermanence should be, and that's what it used to be. I mean, before the card was a thing. Now we just have like 6 cards that do the same thing. I really don't like that. Triple Tactic Talent is not ruling the game, honestly. You can easily choose to play around the card by playing board breakers instead of hand shops. It might be a little dangerous if you run into like FTK decks, but it is what it is. Fenrir, no, that card is not okay at 3. Just limit the card and we'll be fine. And Prosperity, exact same argument. Alright, that's pretty much it for this video, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Do you think these cards are healthy or not for Yu-Gi-Oh? And with that said, I'll see you guys very soon. Peace.